Rolex watches are expensive. Everyone knows that. But here's the real question most people never ask. Are Rolex watches expensive because they are truly worth it, or because the world has been trained to believe they are? Today, we're breaking down why Rolex watches cost so much, not through hype, but through facts, strategy, and power. This is not about luxury. This is about control. Let's start with the most common explanation: quality. Rolex watches are made in Switzerland. They use high-grade steel, gold, platinum, and sapphire crystal. Their movements are precise, durable, and tested under extreme conditions. That part is true. But here's what rarely gets mentioned. There are many watch brands that produce equally accurate, equally durable mechanical watches using similar materials for far less money. So quality alone does not explain why a Rolex can cost $10,000, $20,000, or even $50,000. The real story begins with control. Rolex controls nearly every part of its production process. They design their own movements. They manufacture their own cases. They test and assemble everything in-house. This level of vertical integration gives Rolex two powerful advantages: consistency and scarcity. When a company controls production, it controls supply. And when supply is limited, price becomes flexible. Which brings us to the most important factor of all: artificial scarcity. Rolex does not produce enough watches to meet global demand. They could increase production. They choose not to. Walk into almost any authorized dealer and ask for a popular Rolex model. The answer is almost always the same. There's a waiting list. Sometimes months, sometimes years, sometimes with no clear end. This scarcity is not accidental. It is deliberate. When something is hard to obtain, people stop asking whether it's worth the price. They start asking how to get access. Scarcity turns products into symbols, and Rolex understands this better than almost any brand in the world. But scarcity alone doesn't create a legend. Branding does. Rolex doesn't market watches. It markets authority. Over decades, Rolex positioned itself alongside power and achievement. World leaders wear Rolex. Top athletes wear Rolex. Executives, explorers, and decision-makers wear Rolex. The brand appears at global sporting events, historic expeditions, and elite institutions. These placements are not random. They send one message: Rolex equals success. Once a brand reaches this level, price becomes symbolic. You're no longer paying for metal and mechanics. You're paying for recognition. And that leads to the psychological layer. Rolex is expensive because it must be expensive. If Rolex suddenly became affordable, it would lose its meaning. Luxury brands depend on exclusion. Not everyone is supposed to own one. The high price acts as a filter. Cross it, and you enter a different category of perception. This is why Rolex rarely discounts. Why availability is controlled. Why demand is always kept just out of reach. The price is not a side effect. It is the strategy. And finally, there's resale value. Unlike most luxury goods, many Rolex watches retain, or even increase, their value over time. This reinforces the belief that Rolex is not just a watch, but an asset. Whether that belief is always justified is another discussion. But perception matters more than reality. So why are Rolex watches so expensive? Not because of gold, not because of gears, but because of control, scarcity, branding, and psychology. Rolex doesn't sell time. It sells status. And in a world driven by perception, status is one of the most expensive commodities of all.